Hi folks, this is Karim Raouf for IT Visualizer channel. We will continue our lab, the Matrix Labs, the video number 56. We have been discussing in the previous video the following. We are still working with the Purple Knight Active Directory Security Assessment tool, which is a free tool you can download and run it on your domain controller to get some very valuable data concerning your Active Directory security status. Okay, there is a lot of tests done by this tool. The report contains a lot of useful information, as I have said before. Currently we are working with a group of tests run by this utility called account security tests, and we are currently in the point which is called trust accounts with all passwords. Okay, if we try to see the description of the tests, it's saying that the indicator looks for trust accounts whose passwords had not changed within the last year. What is a trust account? As I have seen from the description, this is a special account used to make trust between domains, different domains or different forests. Okay, so this account is very important, and this account has a password that should be changed frequently, or should be changed every or to be rotated, or the password should be rotated regularly. Okay, for this account, this could mean that the trust relationship was removed, but its corresponding trust account wasn't cleaned up. So maybe you have deleted the trust between a domain and a domain, or between a forest and a forest, but the trust account is still there. So you should make sure that the trust account is deleted after you delete the trust relationship. Okay, this is one thing. What the other section says: likelihood of compromise. Trust accounts facilitate authentication across trusts. Okay, as such they should be protected just like privileged user accounts. So he's putting the trust accounts in the same importance as the privilege accounts. Okay, normally trust accounts passwords are rotated automatically, so this is done automatically. So a trust account without a recent password shade could indicate an orphan trust account. So he's indicating if the password of the trust account is not changed, then that means that the trust relationship is removed. Okay, so this is one thing we should focus on and scan for it regularly to make sure we don't have any trust accounts after removing the trust relationship. So this is the test, and actually we have passed it because I don't have any trust relationships between other domains or other forests. I have only one domain in one forest. So if you go there and ask Perplexity to explain this topic, we are saying trust account with all password used for trust relationship between forest and domains. Let's see the answer of Perplexity and see how he will describe this issue.
To manage trust relationships between forests or domains in Active Directory, it is essential to understand how old passwords are handled for trust accounts. Here's a summary of the key points regarding trust accounts and old password usage based on the provided information. Trust accounts and password management. Trust relationships. Trust relationships in Active Directory allow users in one domain to access resources in another domain. Each trust relationship involves a trusting domain and a trusted domain, with a shared password stored in a trust domain object, TDO. Password changes. The password for the trust relationship is managed by the primary domain controller, PDC, emulator in the trusting domain. This password is changed every 30 days. The old password is retained temporarily to ensure continuity of service during the password change process. Old password usage. When a password change occurs, the old password remains valid until the new password is successfully authenticated across both domains. If the trusted domain controller does not receive the new password due to replication issues or connectivity problems, the old password can still be used to establish a secure channel. Authentication process. If the new password fails authentication, the trusting domain controller will attempt to authenticate using the old password. This mechanism ensures that trust relationships remain intact even if there are delays in password replication. Risks and management. Security risks. Allowing old passwords to remain valid can pose security risks, especially if the old password is compromised. Attackers could exploit this to gain unauthorized access to resources across trusts. Best practices. Regularly monitor and audit trust relationships to ensure that password changes are propagated correctly. Implement strict password policies to ensure that trust passwords are complex and changed regularly. Monitoring tools. Use tools like PowerShell to monitor trust accounts and their password statuses. For example, you can query the TDO objects to check the current and old passwords for trust relationships. Conclusion. Managing trust accounts and their associated passwords in Active Directory is crucial for maintaining secure and functional trust relationships between domains and forests. Understanding how old passwords are handled during trust password changes, along with implementing best practices and monitoring strategies, can help mitigate security risks and ensure that trust relationships remain reliable. Regular audits and adherence to security policies are essential to protect against potential vulnerabilities associated with old password usage in trust accounts. Share. Rewrite. User accounts that store.
Sorry, now we can see that here is explaining the topic why the old password of the trust account could be still used, okay? Because the replication of the new trust account password is not done successfully. So the old password can be used until the other or the new password is replicated, okay? So here is an explanation of the trust accounts and what they do exactly. And as we have seen here, that this is very, very important. We need to focus on to check the regular trust account passwords change. We need to make sure we are focusing and monitoring this kind of privilege accounts. The trust account is considered a privilege account. So this is Perplexity answer concerning this topic. If we go to Claude 3.5 Sonnet and ask it to explain the same topic, so we will go there and read the answer.
Knowing security maintenance in Active Directory environments. Copy. Let's analyze this content and address your question about how a hacker might use a discovered trust account password, even if the trust relationship is disabled. Key points from the content. The indicator looks for trust accounts with passwords unchanged for over a year. This could signify a removed trust relationship without proper cleanup of the associated trust account. Trust accounts facilitate cross-domain authentication in Active Directory. Trust account passwords are typically rotated automatically. An unchanged password may indicate an orphan trust account. Now, to answer your question, if a hacker discovers the password for a trust account, even if the trust relationship is disabled, they might be able to exploit it in the following ways. Reactivate the trust. If the trust was merely disabled rather than fully removed, the attacker might be able to re-enable it using the discovered credentials. This could potentially grant them access to resources in the trusted domain. Lateral movement. Even if the trust is disabled, the trust account itself might still exist in the directory. An attacker could potentially use this account to move laterally within the network where the account resides. Privilege escalation. Trust accounts often have elevated privileges. If the account wasn't properly deprovisioned, an attacker might leverage these privileges to escalate their access within the domain. Persistence. The attacker could use the compromised trust account as a persistence mechanism, especially if it's not being monitored due to the assumption that it's no longer in use. Information gathering. Even without full trust capabilities, the account might still have read access to certain parts of the directory, allowing an attacker to gather valuable information about the network structure. Password reuse. If the same password was used elsewhere in the network, a common but insecure practice, the attacker could try to use it to access other systems or accounts. Social engineering. Knowledge of the trust account and its password could be used in social engineering attacks, potentially tricking administrators into reestablishing the trust or granting additional access. It's important to note that the effectiveness of these methods depends on how thoroughly the trust relationship was removed and how well the environment is monitored. Best practices include fully removing trust accounts when trusts are dissolved, not just disabling them. Regular audits of trust accounts and relationships. Implementing strong monitoring and alerting for any activity involving trust accounts, especially those associated with disabled or removed trusts. Ensuring that trust account passwords are regularly rotated, even for disabled trusts, as long as the accounts exist. This scenario underscores the importance of proper deprovisioning processes and ongoing security maintenance in Active Directory environments.
So this is the answer of Claude concerning the trust accounts. If we try to ask ChatGPT o1 to also explain the same topic, but let's first see. Let me get it in a simple way. If we tell him to explain the topic, let me first get something here. So we can tell him to, just a moment, we will go to ChatGPT and ask it to explain the topic, but let's get it in a simple way. Let's go first and get the prompt for doing that. If you go there and get one of the prompts, where is the prompt? Okay, I need to get the prompt itself, I think. Let's see, I think I have one prompt at least. Okay, no, I think I didn't give it. So, okay, just one moment. Let's first stop at the trust account with all passwords and then get, or we can type it, explain the content of this text or this text with a real world example in the context of Active Directory with a domain named matrix.internal. So let's do that and then put the description and the topic or the likelihood of compromise, these two texts, and put them in the prompt to ask ChatGPT to explain it. If we go down and do like that, and you can tell Control C, and then let's see the answer. So let's see the answer of ChatGPT o1 concerning this topic. So let's read it loudly.
Explanation with real-world example in the context of Active Directory domain matrix.internal. In an Active Directory AD environment, organizations often create trust relationships between different domains or forests to allow users from one domain to access resources in another securely. Trust accounts are specialized accounts that manage these relationships by handling authentication requests across the trusted domains. These accounts are crucial for maintaining secure communication and are automatically maintained by the system, including regular password rotations to enhance security. Real-world scenario. Let's consider a company named Matrix Corp, which has an AD domain called matrix.internal. Matrix Corp partners with another company, Zion Industries, which has its own AD domain named Zion.internal. To facilitate collaboration, the system administrators establish a trust relationship between Matrix.internal and Zion.internal. This setup allows users in the Matrix.internal domain to access resources in the Zion.internal domain and vice versa. When this trust is established, AD automatically creates trust accounts in both domains. These trust accounts are responsible for managing the authentication processes between the two domains. To maintain security, the system automatically rotates the passwords for these trust accounts, typically every 30 days. Issue description. After a year of collaboration, Matrix Corp and Zion Industries decide to end their partnership. The system administrators proceed to remove the trust relationship between Matrix.internal and Zion.internal. However, they overlook an important step, deleting the trust accounts that were created when the trust was established. As a result, the trust accounts remain in the Matrix.internal domain, but are no longer associated with an active trust relationship. Since the trust no longer exists, the automatic password rotation for these trust accounts stops. Consequently, the passwords for these orphan trust accounts have not changed in over a year. Security implications. An indicator that scans for trust accounts with passwords not changed within the last year would flag these orphan trust accounts in Matrix.internal. The presence of such accounts poses a security risk for several reasons. 1. Unauthorized access. Malicious actors could exploit these orphan trust accounts to gain unauthorized access to the Matrix.internal domain. 2. Privilege abuse. Trust accounts often have elevated privileges to manage authentication processes, making them valuable targets for attackers. 3. Compliance issues. Outdated passwords on privileged accounts may violate security policies and compliance regulations. Action required. The system administrators at Matrix Corp should identify orphan trust accounts, use monitoring tools to detect any trust accounts with passwords that haven't been changed within the expected rotation period. Audit trust relationships. Review all existing trust relationships to ensure they are still valid and necessary. Clean up orphaned accounts. Remove any trust accounts that are no longer associated with an active trust relationship. Enhance monitoring. Implement regular checks to automatically flag such issues in the future. Conclusion. By addressing the orphan trust accounts in the Matrix.internal domain, Matrix Corp can mitigate potential security risks associated with outdated passwords on privileged accounts. This proactive approach helps maintain the integrity and security of their Active Directory environment.
So we can see this is the answer of ChatGPT 01, and I think it's a good one actually, and the same for Claude. So this is simply the test and we have passed it. So the next step is to check for unprivileged principals as DNS admins. So the DNS admins are the users responsible for managing the DNS system. Okay, actually we all know that when we promote a server to be a domain controller, in the same time we are installing the DNS service on it, so it is a domain controller and a DNS server at the same time. So basically the one controlling the domain controller will be the one controlling the DNS server, which are domain admins or enterprise admins. So here is looking for any unprivileged principals, maybe a group that doesn't have or is not doesn't have the right to manage a DNS server. Okay, so for example, maybe the accounting team by mistake are added in the DNS admins group. So this is not they are not authorized to do that, and their job doesn't need this kind of privileges to be assigned to them. So this is one thing. The indicator looks for any member of the domain admins group that is not a privileged user. DNS admin itself is not considered a privileged group and is not protected by admin SD holder SD prop mechanism. So this group is not protected with the admin SD holder SD prop mechanism. So if any changes to the rights to this group is done, it will not be reset again. Okay, so this is one thing we need to make sure to monitor this group carefully. However, As some research has shown, a member of this group can remotely load a DLL onto a domain controller running DNS and execute code as system. So you can load a DLL file, okay, and execute something through this DLL, execute a code or a script, okay, through this DLL file by using the most privileged user on the system, which is a user called system. So this is a very critical thing. We need to make sure that the members of this group are only the privileged users like a domain admin or enterprise admin. So administration of DNS is often delegated to a non-administrators, I to say administrators with job responsibilities in networking, DNS, HTTP, etc. So we can divide the administration to two parts, system administration and network administration. So mostly the Active Directory management is given to the system administrators, which are like domain admins or enterprise admins. As for the DNS, the DHCP, they are given to network administrators. They can manage this kind of infrastructure. These administrator accounts may not have the same security controls as the AD administrator accounts or the system administrator accounts, making them prime targets for compromise. For more information on how DNS admins can be abused, we can see the article. Actually, Purple Knight website or Smears, the company that had created the tool, is giving very important articles you can read. For example, like this one, DNS Revisited, how potential attackers can achieve privilege persistence on a DC through DNS admins group. If you go and ask, for example, Copilot to generate a summary for this page, here we can see very simple summary. Let's read it loudly.
Here are the key points from the page. Feature abuse. Users in the DNS admins group can load arbitrary DLLs into the DNS service on a domain controller, escalating privileges to system. Stealthy backdoor. Attackers can create undetected backdoors by exploiting this feature, allowing persistent access to the domain controller. Permissions required. Attackers need read/write access to the Microsoft DNS container and the ability to restart the DNS service. Detection and mitigation. Monitoring specific event IDs and changes to the Microsoft DNS container can help detect and prevent such attacks.
Okay, so this is very simple summary to this article. You can read it in details, and actually their articles are very organized, and they contain screenshots and a lot of useful information. You can read it for more info. So now this test will make sure that non-privileged users are not members of DNS admins group. So this is one important thing to make sure that these or unprivileged users are not member of one of these important or one of the most important or one of the important groups in the Active Directory, even though it is not protected, by the way, by the admin SD holder, which is strange. If this group, through it you can or this group could be a potential point for attack, why it's not protected by admin SD holder? So this is one good question actually. Maybe I can ask AI tool why this is not, or why it's not protected. Let's go ask ChatGPT why Active Directory group. Okay, let's see how we will answer this question and ask a lot of AI tools to do or to answer the same question. So here he begin explaining what is an admin SD holder and what is the SD prop mechanism, and then which groups are protected by the admin SD holder, and then what is the admin DNS group and why it's not protected. Let's see here. Actually, very good answer. He is illustrating the whole subject into points one by one. So DNS admin is not protected by admin SD holder due to following reasons: scope of privilege, limit domain admin. DNS primarily manages DNS setting and does not have inherent permission to modify Active Directory objects outside DNS. This is correct, but there is a security hole, or there is a point, or there is a way that you can use this group to load DLL files into domain controller and issue an attack. But this is not verified by the AI. It doesn't know this point. Not a default critical group. These groups protected by admin are those that can directly impact the domain security and integrity. So he is focusing upon the direct impact of some security groups on the domain itself. So the DNS admins can impact the security of the domain and in an indirect way. Okay, DNS is not included in the default list because its default privileges are not considered as critical to the domain overall security, even though hackers can use it in an indirect way to affect the security of the Active Directory. Decision design consideration. So this is the privileges he see, or he considered that the privilege of this group doesn't affect the security of the Active Directory, even though there is a recent article saying that it can affect the security of the Active Directory in an indirect way. So this is not recognized by the AI tool. Design consideration, performance optimization, including every administrator group in the admin SD holder mechanism could increase replication traffic and processing overhead. So this is one thing, actually a good point, because this can increase the replication traffic between the domain controllers, even though I don't know the direct relationship between the admin SD holder and the replication. Administrative flexibility, excluding certain groups like DNS admins allow organization to customize permissions. So this is one good point. Also to customize the permissions of this group if this is available, okay, without interference from the SD prop process. Okay, historical reasons. Backward compatibility. Changes to the list of groups protected by admin SD holder could affect existing environments and scripts that rely on the current behavior. So also one thing good, these 2 points are good. Security implementation. Despite not being protected, the admin SD holder can pose significant security risk. So here, even though I think he got it from the previous answer, okay, so my previous answer was talking about, no, he didn't, so he didn't see that because actually I didn't tell him, but he has his resources from the internet. Okay, members can potentially load arbitrary DLL or configure settings that allow them to execute code with system privileges on DNS servers. So this is one good thing. Compromising a DNS server can lead to broader attacks such as redirecting network traffic or harvesting credentials. Lack of permissions reset. Without admin SD holder protection, custom permissions applied to the admin DNS admins group are not automatically reset, making it susceptible to permission creep or unauthorized modification. So good answer. Recommendation: regular audit, implement custom protection, custom scripts maybe to check the permissions of this group and the members of this group. Apply the principle of least privileges, assign the minimum required permissions for users to perform their task. Use delegation for specific DNS task instead of granting full permissions or full permissions rise. Good point actually. Monitor for unauthorized change. Anyway, so this is a good answer from an AI tool. If we go to Claude and ask the same question, let's see if he can get us or give us a good answer. Let's first open a new window to ask Claude this question. If you go there and ask it this question, here you go. I'll do like that and see this. So let's see the answer. I think it will be a good one. Let's see first. is not protected because it's not considered a high privilege built-in administrative group by default. The admin SD holder SD-prop mechanism is designed to protect high privilege accounts and groups in Active Directory from unauthorized modification to their security setting. It applies to a specific set of built-in administrative groups and accounts such as domain admins, enterprise admins, and schema admins. The DNS admins group, while it have elevated privileges related to DNS management, it's not included in this protected set for several reasons. Scope of privileges. Admin or DNS admins have specific privileges related to DNS management, but these are more limited compared to the broad domain-wide privileges of groups like domain admin. Correct answer. Historical context. The admin SD holder protection was implemented to secure the most critical built-in groups that exist when the feature was created. DNS admins was not a part of this original set, so he's saying that this group is recently created and admin SD holder didn't know about this group. One thing actually I don't know if this is correct or not. Flexibility. Excluding admins DNS admins from admin SD holder protection allows organizations more flexibility in managing DNS administration without dealing with the strict security controls applied to more sensitive groups. So, risk management, risk assessment. Microsoft likely determined that the potential risk associated with compromising DNS admins, while significant, do not warrant the same level of protection as the highest privileged groups. So he didn't say that this group can be used to initialize an attack. It's worth noting that organizations can still implement additional security measures for the DNS group if they deem it necessary. Okay, a lot of things here. While DNS is not protected by default, organizations should treat it as a sensitive group and implementing appropriate security controls. Here he didn't give us, or he didn't say like Claude 01, like ChatGPT 01, that there is a risk or the kind of risk that can be or we can face using the DNS admins group. He didn't give us the risk like executing DLL or importing DLL files through the DNS and hack the system. Anyway, so this is not a perfect answer from my point of view. Maybe ChatGPT 01 give us a better answer this time. Okay, so this test we have passed it because actually I don't have any members in this group that are not privileged users. Here we go to the next thing, which is user accounts that use DS encryption. Okay, this indicator identifies user accounts which use with the use Kerberos DS encryption types for this account. This is an option. You can check it for the user in the Active Directory. DS is an older cipher with 56 key length that is relatively easy to crack. The only legitimate use for this flag is to support for older systems and environments that only support DS. So I think this is here. He is talking about the Kerberos. I think this is used for securing the connection between the domain controller and the user, maybe during the authentication process, or it is used for encrypting the password of the user. But let's see, or let me read further. Attackers can easily crack DS passwords using widely available tools, making these accounts ripe for takeover. So I think this is a way to encrypt the user's password, okay, using a kind of encryption called DES, okay, which is an old encryption cipher. I think there is relatively new kinds of cipher that can be more stronger than DES. So let's see here the answer of Perplexity when I ask it to explain this topic. User accounts that store password with reversible encryption. I think this is not the topic here. This is a different thing. So I think this will be a different topic. Anyway, so we can see this is very, very simple test just to make sure that we don't use an old cipher for encrypting passwords for the users in the Active Directory. Very, very simple. Okay. To the next test, which is users with password never expire. So this is very, very simple one. You should not check a user or to put this option for a user. This means that his password will never expire. For example, if your maximum password age is 90 days, and you have a user that have this option checked, then he will not change his password after the maximum password age is reached. So this is important because the password should be changed for every account in the Active Directory, because this will make the hacking process much difficult, because the rotating of the passwords for the accounts are very, very good practice for making the hacking a more difficult process. The indicator identifies user accounts where the password never expired flag is set. These accounts can be targets for brute force password attacks, given their passwords may not be strong when they were set. These accounts also tend to be service accounts with privileged access to applications and services, including Kerberos-based services. So there is one case that you can set a user account with the option of password never expire for a normal service account. We have talked about this kind of accounts that are used for managing applications and services. Okay, so you can do this for the normal service account to have the password never expire flag set on this kind of accounts, but you should manually change the passwords or change the accounts and their passwords every certain amount of time. So for example, if you have a service account have this option enabled, you need to record the time that you have set the password for this account, and then regularly after maybe 90 days right click the account, tell him to reset the password. Okay, this should be done. Why in the first place we have this option, for example, checked for the service account? Because if for any reason this account reached the maximum password age, it will stop, okay, until you change the password, and every service and application depending on this account will stop. So this is not an option. We need the applications and services depending on the service account or the application account to be running 24/7. So this is one thing. This is solved by working with the group managed service accounts. The passwords are changed automatically. You don't need to do this manually, and we can exclude this, or we can exclude working with the normal service accounts. Okay, so this is one thing also to focus on. Here we are talking about the normal users. A normal user should have his password expired and to be changed regularly according to the default domain password. Okay, domain password policy. Okay, so here passwords that never expire may be weak and easier to crack. These credentials can provide attackers opportunities for moving laterally or escalating privileges. So this is very, very simple step. Privilege accounts with a password that never expires. This is also one thing. You should not have a domain admin account with this option checked in it, or an enterprise admin, the same. Okay, or a service account or a normal service accounts. We have seen that we can have an alternative way to work with service accounts using the group managed service accounts. Anyway, so the privilege accounts with the password that never expire also is a finding, and this is more important than finding a normal user with a password never expire option. This is for a privilege account. This is very, very important. The indicator identifies privilege accounts using the admin count where the password never expire is set. Okay, so this is also one good thing. User accounts whose password never expire are rip targets for brute force password guessing. If these users are also administrative or privileged account, this makes even more of a target, or this is a good catch for a hacker, because this is not a normal account, this is a privileged account. Okay, so this should not be done, or should not be checked for a privileged account. Users with password not required. This comes to my mind when an account like guest, there is a user called guest on every computer. This account doesn't have a password, okay, and this is also the same. You should not have user accounts with password not required. You should have every account created in the Active Directory to have a password. Okay, And by the way, the guest accounts are disabled and renamed and set, and you should set a password for them, by the way. The key to identify user accounts where password is not required. Accounts with weak access control are often targeted by attackers seeking to move laterally or gain a persistent foothold within the environment. So this is one thing. User accounts that store passwords with reversible encryption. So I know by heart that the Active Directory stores the passwords of the users, okay, in it. So the Active Directory have all of the passwords of the users stored in it and encrypted, okay, and with a very strong encryption. But if you check the option of store passwords for user accounts with reversible encryption, this is a weak point. Okay, this should not be enabled. Okay, so if you go there and see the description, the indicator looks for user accounts with encrypted text PW allowed flag enabled. The secure way of storing passwords is by utilizing one-way encryption, where it is mathematically impossible to derive the original password from the ciphertext. This setting encrypts the source password such that it is possible to derive the original. So this is a kind of encryption for the user's password, okay, by the Active Directory. So you should not enable this option. Leave it for the default, which I think is more secure. Active Directory use a strong cipher for encrypting the user's passwords, okay. This setting encrypts so this setting is used when an application or service utilized authentication protocols that require the original password. So sometimes some applications need to see the password of the user in clear text. They cannot read it if it is encrypted, okay. So this is what he's talking about. Attackers may be able to derive this user password from the ciphertext and take over these accounts. So this is one thing. If we go to Perplexity, user accounts that store password with reversible encryption, if you try to ask it, here is giving us a partial script to get this kind of users that have these passwords. He's saying enabling reversible password encryption is not recommended for most user accounts, and it can pose a security risk if the encrypted passwords are compromised. It should only be enabled if required by specific applications that need the user's clear text password for authentication. If enabled, ensure the domain controllers and networks are secure to prevent attackers from obtaining the reversible password or encrypted passwords. Okay, so monitoring all of these. Here I'm asking it what are the security risks of enabling reversible password encryption. Okay, password theft and a lot of things actually. Okay, so this is one text, or this is one test, and actually I don't have any user that have this kind of encryption enabled. If we go to the last tests for this group of tests, account security group, or test group, users with Kerberos pre-authentication disabled. Okay, this indication identifies users with an option called Kerberos pre-authentication disabled, okay, which exposes them to potential ASREP roasting attacks such as Kerberos or Kerberos roasting. Refer to this source. This is a kind of attack that is initialized by a hacker if the option for Active Directory user account is disabled. This option is disabled for an Active Directory user account. Kerberos with pre-authentication disabled. We will see the AI tools explaining this. If an account has Kerberos pre-authentication disabled, it makes it easier for attackers to send dummy requests to a DC to try and crack its ground ticket. So maybe a little bit of a difficult subject, but anyway, this is the last test in the group of tests called account security. Let's see a Perplexity trying to explain this kind or this test. What does it do exactly? Let's see here the answer. I think it will be simple if we go there and ask it to explain this topic. Okay, let's go there and see the answer. Here we go. that's it, and then read. Okay.
In the context of an Active Directory environment with a domain named matrix.internal, the issue of Kerberos pre-authentication is critical for maintaining security against certain types of attacks, particularly ASRP roasting. Overview of Kerberos pre-authentication. Kerberos is the default authentication protocol used in Active Directory. It enhances security by requiring users to authenticate before obtaining a ticket-granting ticket, TGT. Kerberos pre-authentication is a mechanism that ensures a user must provide a valid password to receive a TGT, which is essential for accessing resources within the domain. Risks of disabling Kerberos pre-authentication. Exposure to ASREP roasting attacks. When Kerberos pre-authentication is disabled for a user account, it allows attackers to send dummy requests to the domain controller, DC, without needing the user's password. This is known as ASREP roasting. In this scenario, the attacker can request an ASREQ authentication server request for the user. Since pre-authentication is not required, the DC responds with an ASREP authentication server reply that includes the TGT and other sensitive data encrypted with the user's password hash. Likelihood of compromise. Accounts with pre-authentication disabled are significantly more vulnerable to offline password cracking attacks. Attackers can capture the encrypted data from the ASREP and attempt to crack it using brute force or dictionary attacks. This vulnerability allows attackers to potentially gain unauthorized access to sensitive resources within the matrix.internal domain. Indicators of compromise. User enumeration. Attackers can determine which accounts have pre-authentication disabled by sending ASREQ messages. If the account exists, the attacker receives an ASREP, indicating the account is vulnerable. Event monitoring. It's crucial to monitor for changes in user account settings related to Kerberos pre-authentication. Specifically, look for accounts where the Do Not Require Kerberos pre-authentication option is enabled. Best practices for mitigation. Enable Kerberos pre-authentication. Ensure that the Do Not Require Kerberos pre-authentication option is not checked for any user accounts in the matrix.internal domain. This setting should be enabled by default, and any deviations should be corrected immediately. Regular audits. Conduct regular audits of user accounts to identify any accounts with pre-authentication disabled. Use PowerShell commands to retrieve a list of such accounts. PowerShell. Get it to user filter does not require pre-auth. EQ $true. Properties does not require pre-auth. User education. Educate users and administrators about the importance of Kerberos pre-authentication and the risks associated with disabling it. Ensure that any necessary exceptions are documented and monitored closely. Optimal monitoring solution. Utilize security monitoring tools that can alert administrators to changes in Kerberos settings and potential ASREP roasting attempts. Tools like Tenable.ad can provide insights into user account configurations and highlight vulnerabilities. Conclusion. In the matrix.internal Active Directory environment, maintaining Kerberos pre-authentication is vital for protecting user accounts from ASREP roasting attacks. By ensuring that this feature is enabled for all user accounts, conducting regular audits, and implementing robust monitoring practices, organizations can significantly reduce the risk of unauthorized access and enhance their overall security posture. Share.
So we can see this is a very, very good answer, but actually it is a little bit complex. I don't actually comprehend it 100%, so we can ask other AI tools to explain the same topic, like Claude, for example. If we go and see Claude, if you have an answer for this kind of test, if we go further, okay, this is all for the trust. Okay, so here we will see the answer, but first let me ask ChatGPT 01 to explain the same topic. If we go there and give him this, let's first refresh because I think it's a little bit hanged. So let's see the answer here, or let's see how he will explain this topic. Okay, let's read the answer.
Explanation in the context of Active Directory domain matrix.internal. Background. In an Active Directory AD environment like matrix.internal, authentication is primarily managed using the Kerberos protocol. Kerberos is a secure method for authenticating a request for a service in a computer network. One of its key features is pre-authentication, which enhances security by ensuring that authentication requests are legitimate before granting access. What is Kerberos pre-authentication? Kerberos pre-authentication requires a user to provide valid credentials, typically encrypting a timestamp with their password, before the domain controller DC issues a ticket granting ticket, TGT. This step ensures that the request is coming from the actual user. Replay attacks are prevented because the timestamp is current. Unauthorized users cannot obtain encrypted tickets for offline password cracking. What happens when pre-authentication is disabled? If pre-authentication is disabled for a user account, the DC does not require the initial proof of identity. It will send an encrypted TGT directly to anyone who requests it. An attacker can request this encrypted TGT without knowing the user's password. The attacker can then attempt to crack the TGT offline to discover the user's password. ASREP roasting attacks. ASREP roasting is an attack technique that targets accounts with pre-authentication disabled. Here's how it works. 1. Attacker identifies vulnerable accounts, scans the domain for accounts with pre-authentication disabled. 2. Requests TGTs from the DC, sends an authentication request for the targeted account. 3. Receives encrypted TGTs. The DC responds with an encrypted TGT since pre-authentication is not required. 4. Offline password cracking uses tools to perform brute force or dictionary attacks on the encrypted TGT to reveal the user's password. Real-world scenario in matrix.internal. Imagine that in the matrix.internal domain, there's a user account named Neo with pre-authentication disabled, perhaps for compatibility with an older application or due to misconfiguration. 1. Attack surface. An attacker gains access to the network and identifies that Neo's account has pre-authentication disabled. 2. Exploiting the vulnerability. The attacker sends a request to the DC for Neo's authentication data. 3. Obtaining the encrypted TGT. The DC provides the encrypted TGT without verifying the attacker's identity. 4. Cracking the password. The attacker uses password cracking tools to attempt to decrypt the TGT offline. 5. Access granted. Upon successfully cracking the password, the attacker can impersonate Neo, gaining access to resources within matrix.internal. Security implications. High likelihood of compromise. Accounts without pre-authentication are significantly more vulnerable to attacks. Unauthorized access. Attackers can gain the same level of access as the compromised user. Potential for further exploitation. If the user has administrative privileges, the entire domain could be at risk. Recommendations for matrix.internal. 1. Identify vulnerable accounts. Use PowerShell scripts or security tools to find accounts with pre-authentication disabled. PowerShell get ADuser filter, user account control band 4194304, properties. User account control. To enable pre-authentication. For accounts where it is disabled, enable pre-authentication unless there's a specific, justified need not to. 3. User education. Inform users and administrators about the risks associated with disabling pre-authentication. 4. Regular auditing. Implement regular checks to ensure that no new accounts have pre-authentication disabled inadvertently. 5. Strong password policies. Enforce complex passwords to make offline cracking more difficult. 6. Monitor authentication traffic. Set up alerts for unusual authentication requests that could indicate an attack. 7. Apply the principle of least privilege. Limit user permissions to only what is necessary for their role. Conclusion. In the matrix.internal Active Directory domain, having user accounts with Kerberos pre-authentication disabled poses a significant security risk. Attackers can exploit this vulnerability through SREP roasting attacks to obtain user passwords and gain unauthorized access. By ensuring that pre-authentication is enabled for all user accounts and following best security practices, Matrix.internal can mitigate these risks and enhance its overall security posture.
So a perfect
For
answer,
more
by the
detailed
way.
information on why Kerberos pre-authentication should not be disabled, please refer to the Microsoft TechNet article, Kerberos Pre-Authentication, Why It Should Not Be Disabled, /social.technet.microsoft.com/content/articles2559.kerberos-preauthentication, Why It Should Not Be Disabled.aspx.
Very, very good answer, by the way. And I think it's much better than Claude. I will see now, but this Kerberos pre-authentication, why it should not be disabled. Actually, we can get also a summarization from this one. Let's tell it to summarize the page. If we go further like this and tell him to generate a summarize for the page. Didn't get what I need. Anyway, so you can read the article and summarize it if you need. And here we can see very good answer of ChatGPT-o1. I think if I go to Claude and see the answer, I think it will not be that good, but let's read it. Here we are talking about which? We are talking about, yes, this one does not require pre-authentication. Okay, I think we can read it loudly. Let's wait for a moment.
Let's break down this content in the context of an Active Directory environment with the domain name matrix.internal. Kerberos pre-authentication. In the matrix.internal domain, Kerberos is used for authentication. Pre-authentication is a security feature that helps prevent password guessing attacks. Disabled pre-authentication. Some user accounts in matrix.internal might have Kerberos pre-authentication disabled. This is generally not recommended. SREP roasting. This is an attack technique that targets accounts with pre-authentication disabled in the matrix.internal domain. Kerberosting. While different from SREP roasting, it's another attack method that exploits weaknesses in Kerberos authentication within matrix.internal. Domain controller, DC, interaction. Attackers could send dummy requests to a DC in matrix.internal to attempt to crack the ticket granting ticket, TGT, of vulnerable accounts. Account vulnerability. User accounts in matrix.internal with pre-authentication disabled are more susceptible to these attacks. Attack process. Attacker identifies accounts with pre-authentication disabled in matrix.internal. They request authentication data for these accounts from a DC. The attacker receives an ASREP, authentication service response, containing encrypted data. This data can be subjected to offline cracking attempts. Security implications. Increased risk of compromised accounts within matrix.internal. Potential for unauthorized access to resources in the domain. Risk of lateral movement if an attacker successfully cracks a TGT. Mitigation. Audit user accounts in matrix.internal to identify those with pre-authentication disabled. Enable pre-authentication for all accounts unless there's a critical reason not to. Implement strong password policies across the domain. Monitor for suspicious authentication requests, especially those targeting accounts known to have pre-authentication disabled. Best practices. Regularly review and audit account settings in matrix.internal. Use tools like PowerShell to identify vulnerable accounts. PowerShell. Copy. Get a user filter does not require pre-auth. EQ $true. Properties does not require pre-auth. Educate administrators about the risks of disabling pre-authentication. Broader security context. This issue highlights the importance of proper account configuration in matrix.internal. It underscores the need for ongoing security assessments and adherence to best practices in Active Directory management. By addressing this vulnerability, the administrators of Matrix.internal can significantly improve the domain's resistance to certain types of Kerberos-based attacks, enhancing overall security posture.
So I can see that the best answer is for Claude or ChatGPT o1. He'll give us a very good answer. So by exploring this test, this is the last test concerning the account security test. In the upcoming video, we will begin talking about AD infrastructure security tests, and we will see how these tests are very important to see our Active Directory infrastructure security. And actually we have failed in these tests. So let's see in the upcoming video how these tests are very critical, and we will explain these tests one by one. Hope this video is informative for you all, and thank you all for viewing. Thank you so much.